Hello, a very good welcome to everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to the webinar from BSI on the best practices on circular economy. We are about to start in one more minute's time. So I'd like to thank everyone for your patience while we wait for a few more to log in, okay? And then we can start in about 1 minute's time. So thank you all for your patience. Okay, once again, thanks everyone for joining us. Okay, a very good morning and afternoon and evening, depending where you are again. Thanks for joining the webinar from BSI on best practices on circular economy. My name is Hao Yong. I'll be the host for today's webinar. We are very pleased to have our speaker here, Mika Peters, who is joining us to give us very good insights on the best practices on circular economy. So before we start, which is just a quick logistic briefing for everyone. So because we are all joining using a Zoom meeting right here, so whenever the speaker is speaking, we'll appreciate everyone can mute your mic as well, so that we will have an uninterrupted session. If your speakers or cameras are not working, or if you're not able to see the screen clearly, do try log in and log out again. Our colleagues will be able to admit you in very quickly as well. Okay. And if you have any questions or you'd like to raise any question, please feel free to use the raise hand and chat function in Zoom, right? We will have a question and answer section at the end of the session. And yeah, please feel free to drop any messages in the chat function. We will be able to visit your question at the end there. And during the question and answer section, please feel free to raise up your hand so that we can attend to you and allow you to ask the questions verbally as well. Okay, so before we start, just like to take a quick 1 minute to introduce about BSI. So BSI, we are a national standards body of the United Kingdom. So in worldwide, BSI, we are more than just a national standards body. We do provide services such as certification, training, standards publication, as well as assurance services. In the field of sustainability, BSI has worked with our clients to help them on their own contribution towards the UN SDG. So the list of the standards are some examples that you can see on the screen. You'll be on topics such as circular economy. Most of you will be familiar with the environment management system as well, ISO 14001, 50001, and etc. ISO 14064 will be something that we have been working with a lot of clients quite a lot recently as well, particularly on the greenhouse gas verification. So what BSI has been very active in is to help businesses to understand the SDG using standards, because we believe standards will be able to help organization to understand the action items better by translating the 17 goals into impactful measures, right? So that organizations can take meaningful steps to achieve the UN SDG. So, for example, goal 12, where you have two relevant standards here, which is ISO 2400 on sustainable procurement, as well as the topic of today, the BS 8001 on circular economy. Right. Another example would be our goal number 13, which provides and there are relevant standards such as ISO 14001 on environmental management system, as well as the 14064/14067 series, which guides organization on providing them guidance on greenhouse gases verification and measurement, right? So if you can see below your screen, there are many standards out there available for you to help organizations to understand what are the available standards out there that can help organizations to achieve their SDG goals. Right. So for BSI ourselves, we are very aligned to the UN SDGs, in particularly the goal number 17, because of our role as the national standards body in the UK, and also through our activities as well in helping organizations to understand standards better, to understand what are the standards that can help organizations in achieving the different UN SDG goals. Right. So if you look at the little diagram here, you'll see that we are committed, in particular, to the goal number 17, partnerships for goals. Our role is to help organizations to understand really the role of standards and be able to identify the areas of improvement and use standards as a basis, right, to guide their management actions into a more sustainable future for the globally. Right. So without further ado, just want to introduce to everyone the outline for today. So we'll be joined by our speaker, Mika Peters, very soon. Today's outline will basically give you a very brief overview on circular economy. So we'll start today with the introduction to circular economy. And then Mika will also share with us on a few circular business models as well that your organization or organizations can consider as you adopt a more circular economic approach to your business and organization's activities, right? And lastly, we'll also share some of the available standards out there on circular economy, which your organizations can consider if you like to benchmark to certain best practices. Okay, next, I would like to introduce everyone to the speaker of the day, Mika Peters. Mika is a guest speaker for BSI. She's the founder for the Global Picture and the Circular Hub, and she has a very vast experience in the field of sustainability and circular procurement. We're very happy to have her today to share with us the best practices all the way from Belgium. But she is the member of the ISO 2400 committee, as well as one of the members in Club of Rome. So I'll pass the mic and session to Mika to be able to share more on the best practices on circular economy. Yeah, Mika, up.
Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Ha-Young, can you confirm?
Yes, Mika, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar. I am Mika Peters. As Ha-Young just told you, I'm founder of the Circular Hub, and I'm also now the chair of the Belgian ISO Commission on the circular economy. So I prepared quite an ambitious presentation today, as I want you to discover the essential concepts of the circular economy. Maybe some of you are already familiar with it, but we want especially to inspire you on some future-proof business models, some best practices within this new economy. Of course, we are very interested to start a dialogue with all of you. So if you have questions, feedback, if you want to share best practices of your company, of your organization, please put everything in the chat box now, and at the end of the webinar, we will have time for a Q&A. So maybe we start with a little video on circular economy. It's the next slide.
We live in a world with finite materials.
We are throwing an awful lot of electronics,
plastic food, carpets,
clothing
away. It's a waste of precious materials.
If we could build an economy that would use things rather than use them up, we could build a future that really could work in the long term.
You design the product in a way that
can be taken apart once the consumer has finished using them.
You remanufacture it and give it out again. You can reduce your production cost hugely if applied correctly.
Instead of garments ending up in landfill,
companies can repurpose it, reuse it, making profit out of their waste.
We take some resources from nature and bring it back in the form of nutrients.
It's very much a natural cycle.
We use 70% less water than conventional agricultural methods.
Our packaging is not a waste, it's something that you can consume and eat.
We redesign everyday products to make them fully recyclable.
We farm as close to nature as is possible.
The H&M Group has set ambitious targets to use 100% sustainably sourced materials.
There is a lot of conversation about not buying clothes, but different models where you can rent clothing.
We develop fully modular headphones that we offer on a subscription basis.
The circular economy itself is inevitable in my view.
It's not one fix, it's about the entire system being redesigned.
This is, to me, the only way to fight climate change, to fight pollution, to fight waste.
This is a business model that stacks up.
Global companies cannot survive in the future without transitioning towards a circular economy. That is a really exciting future.
Let's get started. The first section of this webinar is a short introduction to circular economy and, of course, also the biggest challenges of the circular economy. And let's start with this slide on material prices. Material prices are exploding while the demand for raw materials extends, of course, the supply. And the war for materials is slightly becoming a reality. Those who control their material supply for the future, of course, are those who will be able to grow. The others will have difficulties to stay in competition. Here you see the price evolution over the last 100 years. And of course, we can see there were price fluctuations due to global crises, but now the prices of materials are rising and not to decrease ever again. And if we go to the next slide, it's a very famous visual where we see that only 9% of the economy today is circular. So we have a huge opportunity. Businesses, companies all over the world have a huge opportunity to tackle these challenges. Because please go to the next slide. If we have a look at the scarcity of materials for the next 10, 20, 30 years, we can show it through this visual, for example. Maybe some of you have children. Well, here you see a slide explaining the following. If you are born in 2010, how much is left for you during your lifetime? How many resources are left to create value in the form of products, buildings, and so on? So what can we see? So we can see that materials shortages are a reality within now and 10 years already. You can see the yellow are the fossil fuel reserves. We still have 50, 60 years of fossil fuel reserves, but of course, we want the transition to renewable energies. And for renewable energies, and that's the second bars in green, we need specific metals, specific resources. And here you can see that the resources we need to build renewable energy technologies are already depleted within now and 10 years. The last color, so the red color, there you can see, for example, materials that are used in the electronic sector to create smartphones, servers, laptops, etc. So we face a huge shortage between now, today, 2021 and 2030 of all these materials. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that the leftovers are not at hand here in Europe, but you in Asia, you control the majority of the materials that are left. So this is not so good news for Europe because the precious materials we need so dearly as an input for our economy are not at hand in Europe. So that's why Europe is going very quickly to the next level, because we want, of course, to control the input of our production, and we want to learn as fast as possible how to reuse all the materials that are at hand in our region, in our continent. But of course, the scarcity of materials within now and 10 years will also be visible in Asia. So this brings us straight up to the concept of the circular economy. So maybe the next slide. This is an economy where we design out waste. It's an economy which is less and less dependent on the access of virgin materials. This visual is one of the most simple visualizations of what a circular economy aims at. So the linear economy to the left, still, of course, the mainstream model today. As I just told you that only 9% of the economy is circular today. So still 91 is linear. The linear economy, the mainstream model, is an economy which takes resources, which takes materials from our ecosystem, transforms them into useful products. Then we use the product, of course, and when we no longer need the product, or the product is no longer functional, we throw them on growing mountains of waste. A recycling economy, that's the next stage, and I think we can call ourselves here a recycling economy is an economy which claims to redirect waste flows, redirect the flows into recycling flows, and try to recover the use of these materials and use them in a new production cycle, once or twice. You can see 2 loops there. But finally, the materials will also end up in the bin. And that's normal because the products we use, the cars, the electronics, etc., are not designed for the circular economy. So the not so utopic goal is to create an economy where nothing gets lost, where we aim to reuse endlessly all materials in our economic value process. So therefore, we need to rethink design processes and, of course, design products that last longer. Products that finally can be fixed, can be repaired, and ultimately can be disassembled so that each material flow can recreate economic value through well-organized circular value and supply chains. So that's the ideal of the circular economy. And of course, the circular economy cannot be built on ancient economic mindsets and business models, where owners of materials lose, in fact, the ownership of the materials when they sell their product to the consumer. And the consumer has no tools, has no policies to recover the materials in order to recreate economic value from it. So we need to think in loops and manage the loops of materials very thoughtfully. So please go to the next slide. Yeah, so thinking in loops is in fact the trademark of the circular economy, and we have to manage the loops very thoughtfully, and the inner circles are the most valuable and create the highest economic value. Here you can see the Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly model on the circular economy. It's one of the most famous representations of the circular economy. On the left, you have the biological material and all the loops you can create to recover biological materials and recover the value of biological materials. And on the right, you see, of course, the technical materials where we try to keep materials in the loop as long as possible. And here you can see that the recycling option is the last option. In a circular economy, we try to avoid recycling. We try to extend the lifespan of products by repairing, reusing components, for example, refurbishing, etc. So recycling is really the last step because it's the most devaluating step for the material. It's an economy. The circular economy is an economy. So in an economy, we want to create value and we want to create growth. So imagine we can regain economic value from each material that is already or has already been used once. And we can recapture the material and recreate value, economic value of the same material over and over again. So this is a huge potential for growth in our economy. I know it's quite disruptive as an idea, and all these visuals and butterflies are really quite complex to understand. So maybe we create a much more accessible image when we use the concept of the value hill on the next slide. So the value chain, the value hill starts from the idea that each company has a value chain necessary to create step-by-step value in order to deliver value to your customer or to your user. So the fact of designing and producing goods which are so valuable to the market that your user or your consumer even want to pay a price for it is in fact the essence of our economy, of doing business. So we sell our valuable products in exchange of the price the consumer is ready to pay for it. And then the user or the consumer uses the product till it has no more use. And this can have several reasons. I already explained in the other slide, maybe it's not longer of value, it's not longer functional, it's broken, it's not new enough, it's not trendy enough, several reasons. But then the decay of value starts. The degeneration of value is inevitable, and the product will end up as dump or in a second-hand circuit where the value decreases significantly before ending up as waste, in fact. In the best of cases, to be reused once or as a recycled input for a new production process. So that's the classical way of doing business. We add value during the first step of our value chain, then the user, the consumer uses the product, and once the consumer touches the product, the decay of value starts, in fact. The circular economy, that's the next, where we have it's the value 2.0. But the circular economy has no magic wand, of course, but has some interesting strategies to rethink the concept of value. Of course, we create value in the upwards phase. As companies, businesses, that's our job, to create value for our customers. But we try to create a value generation process that goes far beyond the use phase. So we try to prolong the use phase, and we try to create value beyond the use phase, where, for example, we make things that last longer, we reuse, we repair our products, and of course, we try to recapture the value of our materials even after the use phase of the product. Let's go to Singapore. Singapore launched a green plan last month. It was released last month, in fact. It's the Singapore Green Plan 2030. And in fact, this will help the country's way towards a more sustainable and circular future over the next decade. So here you can see a master plan. It's 2 slides, in fact. So we will share, of course, the slides with you, and maybe we can also share the link to this master plan with you. And this master plan will affect all industries, all sectors, all actors in society, ranging from city and nature, for example. The actions domains are city and nature, sustainable living, energy reset, green economy, resilient future. In fact, it's about green vehicles, it's about clean energy, it's about food security, sustainability as a driver for job creation, for example, green infrastructure, less waste and consumption, and so on. So it's one of the most ambitious plans in the region. And of course, it will need the co-creation of all actors in society, the government, the businesses, civil society, each consumer, each citizen will have to contribute to this master plan. So now we come to the second part of our webinar. So it's the business model section. So at the conceptual level, of course, there is a strong business case behind the circular economy. So both in the short and in the long term. Which company wouldn't want to reduce its dependency on increasingly scarce and costly natural resources? Which company wouldn't want to turn waste into additional revenue and value? And of course, sharpening their customers' insights and value proposition. So here we present 5 underlying business models that are already today adopted in circular businesses. Of course, in the standard making process, we discover a lot of circular business models, and we will integrate them in one of the ISO standards. But here I will give you the 5 most popular business models of the circular economy today. And you can see, of course, the value chain again, with design, production, manufacturing, logistics, because that's the heart of our economy. And of course, circular business models are using this value chain as a way, as a lever to integrate circularity. So the first business model I would like to present to you is the circular supply chain. So the idea here is to replace virgin materials by recycled content, by recyclable input material, or by renewables, bio-based materials. So this model is most powerful for companies dealing with scarce commodities, for example, or ones with a major environmental footprint. I will give you some examples just to understand the business model. The first one is Ecovative Design. It's a US-based company, startup, and they create packaging, a new future-proof packaging based on a mycelium structure together with wood chips and agricultural byproducts. And in fact, this platform enables the engineering of high-performance foams to create a variety of material types and across a wide range of applications. And the most famous applications with this material are packaging applications. Another example is Fairphone. So Fairphone is a Dutch company, in fact, who wanted to challenge, to disrupt in the smartphone market, and they design and they produce, in fact, modular smartphones that are easy to repair and long-lasting. So an inspiring example to the existing industry, of course, because this company is using modular design to extend the lifespan of a smartphone. And maybe you know that the average lifespan of a smartphone is 24 months before it goes to waste. In fact, most of the smartphones today are recycled or refurbished. But Fairphone has another value proposition. They sell you a phone that will have a longer lifespan because you will be able to repair this smartphone endlessly, in fact. They're also opening up the supply chain and mapping the source of the materials. So they are very transparent about all the materials that go into this smartphone. They claim, for example, as well, that they are using fair trade gold, for example. And of course, they use more than 45% recycled content for the cover of the smartphone. So that's also a very interesting example. Please go to the next slide. So the next business model I want to share with you is the recovery and recycle business model. So the idea here is to promote reversed chains by recovering value at the end of our product life cycle. And we will use then the output at the end of the value chain, so after the use phase of the product, as an input or a feed for our own production, or another value chain. So transform waste into value is here, of course, the idea, through innovative recycling and upcycling services. This business model leverages new technologies and capabilities to recover almost all type of resource output, to upcycle or downcycle the products and materials. Again, I will give you some examples. So the first example, in fact, is a New Zealand startup. Yeah, it's a video, so yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So that was an interesting example after the Fairphone best practice. So this startup, I just have to say one more minute on the Mint innovation. So this is a startup, and it has established, of course, innovative ways to enable product reuse and the recovery of value from waste and of end-of-use products. So Mint Innovation, that's the name of the company. It's a really exciting New Zealand-based urban mining company. I will talk about the urban mining later on as well. So they are developing low-cost, scalable processes for recovering valuable metals from e-waste streams. It's estimated by the UN that over $10 billion of precious metals get disposed of as e-waste annually. So Mint Innovation's clean process, they use specific technologies to minimize waste streams, and of course they enable a full circular economy in precious metals. As you know, that metals are becoming very scarce. This is the future. Urban mining is the future, reusing valuable metals and materials that are locked in products and reusing them for new value chains is the future. So they have recently secured $20 million in funding. So they are really accelerating and scaling, and they plan to commission biorefineries in the UK, in Australia, and this is really a very nice example in the region. So the next example, another big best practice, is Resortex. In fact, it's a Belgian startup, but with already global success. So here you can see clothing. So the biggest challenge for clothing and for recycling clothing is in fact to remove all items such as metals, hardware, zippers, buttons from clothing, because this creates a huge barrier for clothing recycling. You have the cotton, for example, but then you have all the hardware, the metals, etc. And of course, if we want to separate the hardware from the cotton, from the textile, it requires human intervention, and this makes it very expensive and time consuming. So Resortex, they have come up with a solution. They create a thread system which dissolves at a high temperature. So this means that whole pieces of clothing can be broken down when heated in an industrial process, of course, and not when you are just walking in the sun. I know in Singapore it's quite hot today, so it's at specific temperatures, all the pieces of the clothing can be separated. So maybe the next example is seen as one of the biggest inspirational practices on circular economy and the link with industry and big industry. So this company is Loop, and it's all about creating a circular system in which containers, so packaging, and other receptacles are reused rather than disposed of and then recycled. I already explained you, recycling is really the last option. So reusing materials is far more valuable. So Loop partners with retailers, for example, with manufacturers, which create new packaging for products. It can be orange juice, it can be laundry detergent, it can be ice cream, etc. You name it. And they package it in durable, reusable packaging, glass packaging, metal packaging, and the consumer returns the container to a store or arrange for them to be picked up at home, for example, after a certain number of uses. So already a lot of big brands are working together, 41 brands now, with Loop. For example, Tropicana, Tide, Colgate, etc. Are already customers, Procter & Gamble, etc. of Loop. Okay, then we move on to the next business model. It's one of the most powerful business models of the circular economy, and maybe it's the most simple business model, because in fact here it's all about extending the lifespan or expanding the life cycle of products and components by repairing, for example, by upgrading, by reselling, refurbishing, reselling products. So product life extension allows companies to extend the life cycle of products, and of course, combined with other circular business models, for example, as a service business models, it's also a very interesting economic model. Values that would otherwise be lost, of course, through waste materials are now maintained or improved by repairing, upgrading, remanufacturing, etc. Using this model, a company can, of course, ensure that products are economically useful as long as possible. So, as an example, this is a circular alternative to light interior walls. So, is a light, solid interior wall that is not scrapped when it's no longer required, but is dismantled and reused over and over again. So, as you know, every interior wall is temporary, no matter what type. After a certain period, they are removed, they are replaced with new ones. So reusable walls by can, for example, be installed very easily, 3 times faster than standard plasterboard panels. And of course, they can be dismantled, rebuilt into different configurations, etc. So this is really a revolution in the construction industry. The next one, as well, a revolution in the construction industry. You all know Lego, the Lego blocks, bricks. This is a wall constructed with real Lego bricks. So it's without mortar, without glue, and of course this system, and it's a patented facade click system, uses traditional bricks, but the system has a click system, of course, where now you need no mortar, no glue. Everyone can build a wall. Even I could build the wall, apparently, and it costs far less than regular walls with mortar. If we think that the buildings of today are the material banks of tomorrow, this is really interesting. Imagine you have a building, 30 years later, you want to give it another function, or you want to replace or maybe just replace the building. Here you can reuse all the building materials over and over again because they are made to be dismantled and reused. So that's already a very big revolution in the construction industry. The next one is a Malaysian example of life extension, and we are still in the life extension business model. So here we have an innovative company changing the state of play. It's a Malaysian-based innovator, so it's called Sticks Fresh. It's a technology which extends the shelf life of fresh products by up to 14 days. So Sticks Fresh is in fact a 100% plant-based sticker, the size of a coin, in fact, biologically reconstructs, in fact, the self-defense compounds of fresh fruits. So it creates a natural barrier to slow down decay, and the reactions are caused by bacterial or fungal activity. So this is really a big solution to tackle food waste within the supply chain. So then the fourth business model is the sharing platform, where we enable increased utilization rate of products by making it possible to share the use or to share the access, the ownership. So this is in fact a collaboration business model. So where we collaborate on platforms and we share products with different product users. It can be individuals, it can be companies. And these platforms facilitate the sharing of overcapacity, for example, or underutilization of products. So they increase the productivity of a product. And of course, the focus here is that a product is used by different consumers. So maybe some examples. So Flow2 is the first business-to-business sharing marketplace that enables companies, for example, institutions, for example, healthcare institutions are on this platform, to share their overcapacity of equipment, also knowledge, also space, for example, meeting rooms, skills. So there are many existing business models based on collaborative consumerism, but normally they just focus on peer-to-peer sharing, but here it's possible to create groups of companies that work together and that share materials, equipment, space, meeting rooms together on this sharing platform. Another example, and I already told you about urban mining, this is New Horizon. It's an urban mining company in the Netherlands again, which has a mission, demolition with a mission. And they see urban mining, of course, as the future. There is an increased demand for materials. And of course, there is a willingness to pay more for materials. But it's also interesting to look at alternatives, such as reusing existing construction materials. So, of course, at the end, within now and 20, 30 years, there will be a lack of new building materials. Cement, for example, there is a big challenge in the cement industry. So here the goal is to keep the value of the materials as high as possible during the demolition phase, so that the materials can be reused as an input for a new construction project. Maybe the next slide. That's the last business model I want to present to you today. So that's the product as a service. It's really becoming a very popular one. Everyone knows Netflix and Uber, etc. So that's also a bit of product as a service. So the next business model is to offer product access and retain ownership of the product. So product as a service provides an alternative to the traditional model of buy and own, where the consumer owns the product. Here it's the producer that owns the product during the use phase. So this model turns incentives for product durability and upgradability upside down, because now it's the producer who has a huge opportunity or benefit to make products that last longer, because the longer they last, the more revenue they will create. So the ownership remains in the hands of the producer, not in the hands of the consumer. And one of the most powerful ideas here is light as a service. From Signify, it's the Philips company. So lighting as a service is a service delivery model in which light service is charged on a subscription base, like Netflix, rather than via a one-time payment. So light vendors have used, it's called LaaS, light as a service strategies in selling value-added services, so, such as, for example, connecting Internet of Things technologies to lighting, etc. So we don't buy light technologies, we just rent light, and the light we need to function within an organization. Another example of this is flooring as a service. It's the next one. So where we just rent the carpet tiles. We are not the owner of the carpet tiles, we just rent them on a monthly basis. And of course, the producer takes back the used carpet tiles and recycle them in their own production process to remake new materials for new tiles. That's the whole idea. They control the material cycle of their products because they know after several years they will get back the control over the materials. So even if materials are getting scarce, they will always have access to their materials again because they just rented the material. So here in the next slide, I will not go deeper into this slide, maybe in a training session, but this is a spectrum of possibilities. Of course, on the left, you have the product-based value, pure product, the classical way of doing business. And then we go a bit more to the left, where we have product service systems, where we sell a product, but with a service. And then at the right, we have the pure service value proposition, for example, the Netflix example. So now we come to the end of the webinar. We know, please go to the next slide. Yeah, to the standards. So we know that many organizations do their bit in terms of recycling, or maybe they source locally, but we are far from a world where the economy is truly circular. Apparently only 9% of the world's economy is circular today, so we have a lot of challenges ahead. One of the biggest challenges are the universal frameworks, universal definitions on what the circular economy is. And of course, a global understanding of circular economy business models and, for example, monitoring systems. So BSI already has a first standard on circular economy. I will show it to you later on, but maybe first go to the ISO standards in development. In fact, the ISO initiative to create standards on circular economy is in fact born from the lack of the truly global vision on what the circular economy really is and the lack of this universal model. So there is a new ISO technical committee, and they are now developing 4 standards on circular economy with more than 70 experts. You can see the participating members for standards on the development. And of course, we already have 2 standards. We already have a British standard. I will talk about it in a few seconds. And we already have a French standard. But this committee intends to produce a set of internationally agreed principles, methodologies, frameworks on what a circular economy is. They want to develop a management system standard, in fact. So because of the urgency, they want to work as quickly as possible. But you can imagine it's not easy to develop 4 standards. I will just explain the 4 standards to you. The circular economy framework and principles for implementation is the basic standard. Then we have the guide on business models and value chain. So I talked a lot about this today, the business models and the value chain. Then the third standard is about the measuring the impacts. So how can we measure the impacts of circular economy? What is a circular product, for example? How can we measure the circularity in a product? And then the last one is a performance-based approach where we give an overview of case studies. So maybe just one word about the British standard. The next. No, we have this is in fact the world's first standard on circular economy, and this standard gives flexible frameworks, gives guidelines on how to create circular economy into your business or organization. So this is already a fantastic realization, and the standard has been launched several years ago already. So this is really a pioneering standard. But maybe I am coming to an end now of my presentation, and I would like to thank you for your participation, of course. I will come back to you at the end of the webinar to answer some questions, and I think Hao-Young will now take over the webinar. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, of course.
Thank you, Mieke. Thank you, Mieke, for sharing your experience and, of course, the breadth of the knowledge in terms of different business model relating to circular economy. Right. So in view of time, we will just we will go through a quick introduction of how you can start your journey towards circular economy. So BSI, we organize a lot of events and webinars such as this as well to talk about topics such as sustainability. So if you'd like to discover more information, resources, and tools, right, you can find it on BSI's website. Or you can also opt in to one of our newsletters in order to be updated on any updates or new events and webinars relating to topics such as sustainability. So, or if you like to, you can also speak to us by dropping us an email or an info.sg. If you're away from Singapore, you can contact us as well. We will link you to the respective representative in your country that can assist you on this. So essentially, in your journey towards circular economy as well, it's good to gain a deeper understanding through training. BSI, we do provide training on circular economy, which will help you to understand better on the model. With that as well, with the standard, you can also benchmark your organization with a particular standard, so you know where you are and decide, what will be your plans in the next few years. And of course, it also helps you to communicate with your stakeholders as well in understanding what are the critical actions or measurable actions that you can take in your journey towards a circular economy model. So BSI can help you in some of this, including some of the other sustainability topics as well, in helping you in certification, training, and customized audit as well, and as well as verification if you like to perform this internally or down towards your supply chain to understand better where you are in terms of doing a health check for your organization. You can also purchase standards from us via BSOL or by contacting your local BSI office if you have good interest on purchasing the BS 8001 Circular Economy Standard. Right, so as what Mieke has shared, there's a standard already now available from BSI, and it gives you a very good framework on the different business models and approaches that you can take. We will also share a link to an executive briefing by BSI to give you an overview of what this standard is about and how your organization can take action after this course, after this webinar. Right. So just a quick sharing, we are organizing a circular economy training course. It will be via virtual classroom, and with this course as well, the participants will also receive a copy of BS 8001 Circular Economy Standards along with the training material. So we'll be happy to share with you more information through the post webinar email later on as well. Right. So in view of time, I think we are at a Q&A session. So what we would like to do is, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop a chat. Otherwise, you can also use the raise hand function as well in order for us to unmute you, so you can ask the question. So now, Mika, probably I will go through the chat and let's see some of the questions that we have. So looking at the first one, Mika, we have a question from Jimmy Soon, asking, is there any distinctive difference between regenerative economy and circular economy?
Yeah, it's circular economy, of course, is the general concept. There are a lot of concepts that are a part of the circular economy, and the regenerative economy is one of them, for example. It's not always the regeneration, of course, of materials and products. It can also be just, for example, to create or design products that last longer, for example, etc., etc. So there are different business models within the circular economy, and maybe different economies of parts of economies under the circular economy umbrella. But the circular economy is seen as the new economic model and concept. I think maybe it started a bit in maybe it started already decades ago, but the formal start of the circular economy started maybe in Europe, especially in the Netherlands, because of course the sense of urgency is much bigger in a continent which has no access to materials, to virgin materials, and is completely dependent on the input of materials from other continents. So that's a logical explanation, but now it's a global challenge. It's a global challenge because, of course, we are sharing the same ecosystem on this globe, and the visual I showed you with the material shortages is a global analysis. So even you are more privileged in Asia because you have more access to materials than Europe and the US. But even Asia will face material shortages between now and 10 years. So that's why I think the momentum of the circular economy is now there as well for Asia. So as far as I am concerned, I think the circular economy is the new economic model, and maybe will replace, or maybe it will be the next step after the fourth industrial revolution as a new economic era. So, but that's just a prediction. Let's see what the future brings, of course. So I see some other questions. Is there a circular initiative in packaging materials of electronics industry? Yeah, of course, because the idea of circular packaging, we will organize a summit on circular packaging, in fact, this summer as well, is really an interesting one because it's a part in the value chain, of course. You have to package your products. Primary packaging is always at the production side as well. But circular packaging is quite simple. It's about creating packaging or using packaging that is reusable, for example. It's about using packaging that is created from recycled materials, for example, recycled timber fibers. And the minimum is to use packaging that is recyclable, but that's not a big challenge because every package today is recyclable. So the first step is recyclable packaging, and that's really the minimum. The second one is to use packaging that's created entirely or partly from recycled content. It can be plastic, it can be paper-based material, etc. But the best and the best option, of course, is to use reusable packaging that can be used over and over again. So you see a lot of companies now using specific reusable boxes as packaging. Also in the e-commerce world, because for them packaging is really key, of course. we see a lot of initiatives where we send products to consumers in reusable packaging, and we try to recollect the packaging and to reuse the packaging over and over again. So that's the idea, of course, of circular economy and packaging. And maybe there's another step that's not using packaging at all, but that's maybe too utopic. But a lot of packaging is not needed as well. I'm sure if you buy a smartphone, there is some functional packaging to protect the product, or to, as a marketing, of course, you need a packaging, but you will notice there is a lot of packaging that is really not needed. So to design other packaging and minimize the reuse of materials in packaging is in fact the best option, according to my advice, of course, but maybe there are other experts in the packaging industry with other perceptions. But that's really an interesting dimension in circular economy, the packaging, because packaging goes almost immediately to waste, and that's a quick win. So the next question, what is the reason? Sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt that. We have Bastin who raised up a hand. Maybe I can unmute Bastin for you to ask the question to, yeah, Bastin, if I may. I think Bastin has already raised the question in the chat box. Maybe Mika, if you could address the subsequent question first for Ka Leong, then maybe we can answer Bastin's question as well.
Yeah, why is the reason that recycling is the last option? Yeah, of course, circular economy is in the first place in economy. So we want to create value, economic value of materials. So the idea is to recapture material flows and to reuse material flows at their highest value, and even try to upcycle the value of the material. For example, from textile waste, you have fiber materials you can reuse to create some bricks, specific bricks that you can use to build furniture, for example. So that's upcycling, because yeah, you have fiber waste, which is value, it has not a lot of value, of course. So if you upcycle those waste streams into products that again will have, for example, a lifespan of 30 years or 20 years, and you can resell street furniture, for example, for a high price with recycled content, that's really an economic opportunity. At the other hand, if you just go to the recycling option, we talked a lot about smartphones. A smartphone costs, I will just now talk in any currency. For example, a smartphone costs thousands. If you use it 2 years, it's mostly outdated. So you have two options. You can refurbish it, or you can recycle it. So if you refurbish it, you can still sell the same smartphone for example, 500. If you repair it and recycle it for 500. If you recycle it, it's worth 4 or 5 credits from the 1,000. And of course, you noted in your question, because there is a high energy consumption, of course, as well. The recycling process, if you look at the impact of the recycling process, it's energy intensive. We need a reverse logistic process. So of course it can create jobs, local jobs, because recycling is often also a local activity. But as we look at the life cycle impact of recycling, it's not a win-win situation. It's really the last option. If there is no other option, we recycle. But first we regenerate the value of the material or even upcycle the value of the material before recycling. So then we have a last question. Yeah, it's quite difficult to create. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I think Mika, if I can take this question for
Yeah, of course.
I think it's asking if BS 8001 is an auditable and certifiable standard, right? So for BS 8001, it is not certifiable, but we do provide verification services against the standard. The BS 8001 is a guideline to provide organizations with the different principles and models of going for circular economy, and BSI has done the BS 8001 verification in many BSI countries to help organizations to ascertain their maturity in terms of circular economy in their organization or a certain product line. So you can organizations can use it to understand the different level of maturity in terms of where they are using against the BS 8001 circular economy standard. So it's to help organizations to understand where they are and to build towards a more circular, or rather the endpoint is to have a circular economy product line or service across one or many of the product lines. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question for everyone. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for the very good question and answer session. A lot of very good answers coming from here. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and joining us through this webinar. And I'm very sorry that it has overshot by quite some time. But I hope all of you find it to be very interesting and insightful. Especially, I'd like to thank Mika for being the guest speaker for us, and thanks Mika very much for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and bringing up all these circular economy standards into life by sharing a lot of examples. So I'd like to thank everyone once again. And Mika, is there anything else that you'd like to address before we end the session?
No, I also want to thank everyone, and so I hope today or tomorrow you will set your next step in the circular economy, and I hope to see you again in one of the training sessions, for example. So maybe till the next time then.
Yeah. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the webinar with us. So the slide decks will be shared with you after this session as well, after you have completed the post-webinar survey. So do look up for it. The email will also contain a lot of very useful links as well, including some of the white papers that Mika and BSI has shared earlier. So thanks everyone. Look forward to seeing you again in many future webinars that BSI hosts. And in the meantime, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.